What's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 63 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of healing sibling dynamics when they come from a narcissistic, abusive household with our returning very special guest, Johnny Cole, and his amazing sister, Emily. You can go follow Johnny Cole over on all forms of social media. His company is at Hey Brother Co., or you can follow his personal account at Hey Brother Johnny. That is HeyBrotherJohnny. So please support both of them for being on this podcast and sharing their stories. And hey, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in our Discord in the podcast participants channel along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. And just a quick disclaimer before we start. I am not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of these topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in our descriptions. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. So, sibling dynamics within narcissistic abuse is a very interesting topic that Johnny chose because him and his sister were raised by a very controlling, patriarchal, abusive, narcissistic father that they both no longer have any contact with. So we're going to be discussing that in this episode. There's a lot of dynamics that really go into narcissistic abuse. There's triangulation and favoritism, sibling roles, emotional manipulation, healing. Like, those things are really important because really with triangulation, it's getting the children to fall in line by making one of the children the bad guy and being like, look, this child is the problem. You don't want to be like this child, do you? No. We're going to be better than this child. And so Johnny expressed to me that his sister, Emily, faced a lot of triangulation and a lot of scapegoating. We're going to be using a lot of different terms in this episode, so I will be putting a description with each and every term so that we can be informed about the terms when talking about narcissistic abuse. I have to give this disclaimer. Everybody has a little bit of narcissism. We need a little bit of narcissism to survive in the world, right? You have complete selflessness on one end of the scale and then narcissism on the other end of the scale. People with NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder, have a disorder, okay? They were raised in an environment where they had to they had so much insecurities. So instead of, going through those insecurities and saying, okay, why am I insecure about this? They go to the opposite end of the scale and project superiority. Okay. Not everyone with NPD is a bad person, and not everyone who may have narcissistic traits are abusive. Okay. This is the very extreme end of the scale. All right. If you feel called out by this episode, that is not our intention, but maybe you should have some self-reflection, right? Whenever we feel attacked or called out, whether it's intentional or not intentional, that's a time for us to reflect on why we're feeling that way. And just a little bit of reflection. If you're liking what we're doing here on the Trauma Dump Podcast, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing episodes. We post new episodes every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And that is a beautiful perk of being subscribed to the Trauma Dump Podcast. You don't have to remember that. You can just click that bell and you'll get a notification every time we post. So please remember, like, subscribe, comment down below any episodes that you want to see from us, or if you relate to Johnny and Emily and their story, and please share the show. That really helps us out a lot. Any support helps, okay? So like, comment, subscribe, share the show, and if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show. That also really helps. Even if you're like, I fucking hate this podcast, 1 star, that's fine. I accept your criticism. If you have criticism for me, I'd love to hear it, okay? I'd love to know. All right, let's get into this episode. Hello, guys. Welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good that you're here. I'm excited. I'm really excited. So, before we start this episode, I wanted to ask you, love, what are your pronouns?
She, her.
Okay. And Johnny, what are your pronouns?
He, they.
Beautiful. Are you guys comfortable with discussing your personal experiences?
Absolutely.
I fear yes.
I fear. Oh, no. I don't want to add fear into it, but just to make sure I'm not crossing any of your boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Also, if you feel uncomfortable or maybe even triggered, we can take a break. And if you don't feel like answering a question, I will skip it. Okay. I promise I'm not going to get offended because my priority is to make sure that you both feel safe at all times.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So, how do you guys know each other?
Since birth.
Birth. Who is the oldest?
That would be me.
Beautiful. So, older sister, younger brother, sibling vibes, dynamics. But like, who's the tallest though?
That would be me.
By like how much?
A lot.
Like
almost a whole foot. Yeah, almost
you're,
an entire
you're
foot.
5'5"?
Yeah, I'm just under 5'5".
Yeah, so you're like 5'4". I'm 6'4".
Yeah. I feel that both of my younger brothers are like giants, like way taller than me. And it's so frustrating because my middle brother, like everyone always called us the Taylor twins. We're 2 years apart, but he's really freaking smart. So he was in my grade or 1 grade beneath me. Like we were always like neck and neck.
Mm.
And he was always the same height as me until puberty. And then he grew. And that was like distressing on so many levels. He just got
I still relate to that.
Yeah.
It was the exact same thing. We were the same height for such a long time. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but you at some point passed me in height and I was devastated.
14, probably like 14
Yeah.
to 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shut up really quick though.
Yeah, it was like one summer.
Yeah.
Energetically though, I think you're still taller than me energetically and until like I was into my like college years.
Yeah, then we reversed.
Yeah.
I love that. I hope that energetically I'm taller than my brothers, but I fear that they think not. But either way, it's a vibe. So today we're going to be discussing healing sibling dynamics when it comes to narcissistic abuse. And Johnny chose this topic, and I want you to explain to us why you chose this topic.
Absolutely. So I am a men's coach and a men's work practitioner, which is a movement towards self-development and redefining masculinity in a healthy anti-patriarchal way for men around the world. And I lead men's groups virtually. I lead men's retreats. I also have a high school boys mentorship program. And the reason that I'm in this field is because of our upbringing, because of our experience growing up in a very patriarchal household with a narcissistic, abusive patriarch, our dad. And it influenced my life so much to the point where I questioned my identity. I questioned who I was. And in that origin story, though, it's this universal experience that happened also to like my sister and my mom. And I wouldn't be the man that I am today without my mom and my sister's influence. And so it would almost be kind of like omitting a key part of my story to not talk about how like my relationship with my family outside of just the abuse from my dad did influence like my journey. And I also think it's very helpful for people to hear more about sibling dynamics, because that's similar to how the father wound is not spoken about often enough in the right way. I feel like the sibling wounds are not really spoken about in the mental health context, but lots of people who experience childhood abuse or trauma or anything like that have some pretty core wounds with relation to siblings. And Emily and I, and Love and I have navigated that together over many years. I just turned 27 yesterday, and she is 29. So it's been a really long journey to to get to that. But that's why I chose the episode, is because I wanted to talk a lot more about like the women in my life that are so incredibly influential, and also how much better my life is for pursuing men's work through a lens that is like feminist informed, and like listening to the women in my life and acknowledging how they've shaped me, and seeking to closen the relationships and bridge the gap that was created from our household dynamic by my dad.
Mm. And Love, you are the older sibling, which I can relate. When you think of the way that you were raised and influenced by your father, how did it make you view your relationship with your brother?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like from a very young age, pretty much from the moment I first met him when he was born, I have always kind of intrinsically felt very protective over him. Um, and I think I'm a very protective person in general with my friends and family, but with John in particular, I was very much like, that was my whole purpose of being for a really long time. Like, I just loved him so much. I was just convinced that, it was my responsibility as the elder sibling to do what I could to make sure that he was safe and he was protected and all that kind of stuff.
I'm literally already crying. Get some tissues.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this to John before. We've talked about it before, but the earliest memory that I actually have is from when it was around the time that we first moved to Ohio. I think he must have been like 2 or 3, and I think I was maybe 4 or 5 at the time of this memory. And all I remember is that I was carrying him and I was running down a hallway to go to the garage because our parents were fighting at the time and they were screaming and I was scared. And it was my mission to get John out of there. And so I don't remember what they were fighting about, but I do remember running down the hallway with him and then getting him into our family's car at the time. And just as I had locked the car doors, our dad came barging in and he was yelling and screaming and he was demanding that I open the door and unlock the door. And I just completely refused because I was like, absolutely not. I've got him over here. And this isn't good for anybody. So I don't think that my dad was the one who instilled that in me, but he did definitely shape our relationship as siblings, because one of the main dynamics that he created was this isolation of each of us. And he really just tried to play us against each other as much as he could. And I think that when we were young, like under 10, we were really, really close. I mean, we had some really, really good experiences with mom where she was reading us stories and we would go frolic in meadows and go to homeschool group and stuff like that. And we shared a lot of the same interests and we would play together all the time. And then as we kind of reached puberty, I think that was when it really started to disintegrate between us.
Yeah.
And I do remember that when we were younger, around that age, our dad paid a lot more positive attention to me than he did you. And I don't I think it was because I was maybe the eldest, or because I fit better what he was looking for in a child of his own, at least for the time being. And then once we kind of um hit puberty and then started to develop as like individual people and went through high school, it was very, very apparent that neither of us really fit what he was looking for. And so I think that was like really when it was the worst between us.
Yeah.
And I think that that was like really when things broke down and we were just like we couldn't have conversations. Like there would be multiple days on end where even though we lived in the same house, we just wouldn't see each other at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really,
Yeah.
really
As
difficult.
it was animus, like there was animosity.
Yeah.
Like it went from, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of resentment between us.
Definitely.
I think not to not to call you out or anything, I think most of the resentment was yours
Yeah.
for me. And most of what I felt was more like confusion and grief at not having a good relationship with you. And I think you felt that too, but it was also like because of how similar I am to our dad, I think that I butted heads with him a lot more.
Hmm.
And that really was very triggering for you for a long time.
Yeah.
That I would actually engage with him and try to like in my perspective, I was trying to problem solve and like resolve things and like come to a happy conclusion and like mediate. But
Yeah.
I think it ended up just causing a lot more stress for everybody and you in particular.
Yeah. There's so much that you said there. And I also just want to say, like, I think the very standard dynamic of the parentified eldest daughter, which is like
Mm.
common in a lot of households. I feel like Grace is probably resonating with this. A lot of listeners who are an eldest daughter will resonate with the principle of because of your gender and the fact that you're the first sibling, um, you are assigned a lot more like caretaking responsibility. So
Yeah.
eldest siblings in general, but then that's compounded by your gender
Mm.
as a woman or as a girl, and then that innate caretaking desire as well. So if I had to synthesize like your share there, it would also be, our upbringing shaped your relationship and perception of me, that you like were innately inherently protective and caring and loving, and then over time our father tried to drive a wedge between us and successfully did so.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of like responsibility maybe placed on you to think about caretaking, and you place a lot of responsibility on yourself as well to think about, solving problems for our family and like looking out for me, which I very much tried to like reject for all of our adolescence and stuff like that.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to me that, there were a lot of different dynamic shifts of love being the golden child at some points, and then being the scapegoat at others, and Johnny being the scapegoat consistently. Um, and I think it's really interesting that you point out, Love, that the similarities that you share with your father caused Johnny to feel like you weren't someone he could maybe rely on emotionally. Is that true?
In narcissistic abusive households, the roles like are shifting and ever changing, and you can sometimes play more than one role. So I would say that I've actually never been much of like a scapegoat in our household. It more so like the lost child, the invisible child for a while,
Yeah.
and then from there golden child in some ways. But yeah, what I'll say is like Emily has a really fiery, or Love has a really fiery personality, and is quite. It's natural for you to be kind of combative and like assertive. You are the type of person that never backs down from anything, which is really amazing in a lot of situations, but also means that you have a really hard time like stepping back and like choosing to not engage. So a lot of times, yeah, which is just a lot like dad, just like aggressive, assertive.
Yeah.
And that's not an energy that I respond to very well. at all in general. And also like I'm extremely sensitive. And yeah, so it means that sometimes things feel with you like it will escalate, like no matter what. And I tend to be quite avoidant. So when things escalate, when conflict happens, like I want to remove myself from it, and you just like no matter what will continue to like until whatever happens. And this still comes up today in our dynamics as well. Like recently in July, I had like a kind of a mental health crisis that resulted in, yeah, like a conflict between us. And I think what I needed in that moment was like to be like left alone or some like deep breaths or something. And you kind of like cornered me a little and like tried to set boundaries and assert, hey, like you can't be, I was like yelling and like screaming, but it was also like your nervous system in the presence of mine was continuing to activate me. And you, because of your never back down, you like stood in a doorway and like did not allow me to like leave when I was saying like leave me alone, leave me alone. And like that's where that flared up in you, is like your desire to set a boundary with me and create a sense of safety for yourself also was fueled by your like never back down, when I think the proper de-escalation in that is for both of us to like actually be away from one another. So sometimes that can still flare up today, I think.
I mean, in that instance, you were still kind of like screaming and going on even after I had left. So
You
I
you
was,
didn't leave.
no, I did though. I mean, a couple of times. I did come back, I think twice, and then you came upstairs, and then mom came in to talk to you, and
Yeah.
then you left.
My recollection is a little different, but I
I
sibling
think it's important to pause
yeah.
and point something out. Our perceptions of different events will be totally different based on the context, based on our past relational traumas, and then based on, the ways that we deal with conflict. And I like how Johnny pointed out, I'm a little bit avoidant, but love, I can really relate to you where I'm the exact opposite of conflict avoidant. I will say to the end of my days, I love conflict. I really do. Any form. I thrive in conflict because that's what I was really raised in a very combative household where I was constantly defending my siblings from my mother. Constantly. It was a never ending battle. And so my siblings and I will fight. We don't really ever yell at each other, but we will openly disagree with one another. And it may seem to an outside perspective that we despise each other, but we were raised in a way at which it's okay to disagree and it's okay to not like each other. We're still going to love each other. In a heated moment, when our cortisol levels are really high, our adrenaline is really high, and it sounds like probably both of your perceptions of what happened is true. It is true. Okay. I believe that Johnny felt cornered. I believe that he felt, attacked in a way. I believe that he wanted you to go away, but his perception, maybe you went away and he was still in his head about how he felt. And then maybe he recognizes that you're back. He doesn't realize that you actually did go away and come back. Maybe he doesn't recognize that she did give me space and then she came right back, which could, be like extremely overwhelming for when we're in a stressful situation and we feel boxed in. Something that really helped me with my siblings, because my brothers shared a room and I had my own room. But something that really helped me was if one of my siblings was arguing with the other, or if I was arguing with one sibling, my room was always a safe place. So my youngest brother would come into my room all the time if he was arguing with the middle brother. Middle brother would come into my room if he was arguing with the younger brother. And I was always the mediator. That was the role that I was assigned in my narcissistic family. And it sounds like that was the role that was assigned in your narcissistic family as well, love, of being the mediator, whether it was intentional or unintentional. You felt the responsibility to mitigate stress or try to resolve stress or parent your little brother, which never was your job. It never was your job to parent your little brother, but you, whether like subconsciously or consciously, noticed that there was a very big gap in the way that your baby brother was parented, and you were put in the position. I mean, the first thing you talked about was how you like tried to rescue your baby brother from a stressful situation and get yourself in a protective place that was locked. That could have also created something in Johnny where there's conflict. I need to get away from the conflict as soon as possible and avoid that conflict. That could have like fostered in him and in the way that he developed from a young age to recognize that whether conflict is good or bad, it's bad for my nervous system. I don't know how to regulate it quite yet, to the extent that you probably are learning, Johnny, as a man, as an adult, learning how to regulate conflict. But that it sounds like to me that the dynamic that you guys have currently with conflict has been present in your life from the very beginning, from the first story that you said. And I just want us to take like a really deep breath, really quick, and recenter ourselves, because I could feel you guys getting a little bit heated. Both of your perceptions of what happened is correct. Where you guys can meet in the middle is listen to how it affected you. So I want to like get you back into that conversation and use I feel statements. I want Johnny to go first and say how he felt in the moment, what his perception of what happened. And then I want Love to give her I feel statements. And then I want Johnny to say, this is what I wish would have happened. And then Love to say, this is what I wish would have happened. We start like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel that from childhood, both you and mom tend to have a hardened response to conflict, where you harden to prepare yourself for a fight. And my nervous system is very sensitive to hardening and aggression. So that doesn't feel safe for me. And that is a personality trait which I have said before is like really amazing in so many ways. But I think for creating a sense of like safety and trust with my communication style and attachment, all of that is really hard for me to resonate with and feel safe around. So I feel that during that particular mental health crisis, which I want to move on from and talk more about our general story at some point, but in that particular situation, I feel that the way that you came downstairs to the basement when I was initially like experiencing that crisis and was like yelling and screaming while using a power tool is you came with a hardened instructive. You told me, you're done for the day, you need to stop. And so you started to like instruct me, command me, and demand things of me, which is your way of, again, like creating a sense of safety, trying to get control and like solve a problem. And like, here are the ways, it's A, B, C, like you need to stop this because this. And I feel that I just don't respond well. Like that's hardening. And I think like softening is like, you're clearly not okay. Can we please take a breath together? Oh, you're telling me you need to be alone? Okay. I'm worried about your safety. So I will leave you alone, but it would make me feel more safe if you put down the power tool and just took some breaths, and I'm going to go here. And I feel that is like the softening versus the like, you can't talk like that. You can't act like that. You're done for the day. All right. We're done. Let's go. Let's which also I felt was like talking to me like I was a child and not like grown man who like does a lot in our household for, you know, for our family unit. So that was how I felt about that situation.
For me, I don't remember exactly how it started. I think it was because I heard you in the basement. Um, but I had felt for like a couple of days up to that point that there was something wrong with you, like you weren't feeling yourself. Um, and I was very conscious of that because I think it's because I've been assigned and also kind of assigned myself to be the mediator of the family. I've always been very aware of the moods of everybody else in the family. So as soon as I feel that there's tension or frustration in anybody else, I think I immediately switch into like problem solving mode. Like, how can I make them happy again? And I felt so stressed and scared that you were that explosive. I didn't know how else to help you other than try and tell you, I feel you need, I think you need to stop. Like what you're doing right now is not healthy for you. That was me trying to be soft. And I think the hardness that you were interpreting was me trying to be as calm as possible so that I didn't escalate. But I can completely understand how that was interpreted as hardness. But I felt like I felt like I knew what the problem was, and it was what you were doing in the basement. And if I could just get you out of the basement and to stop doing what was triggering you, then we could have come to a resolution and like figured things out. But that wasn't how things went. But um I mean, you know, obviously we did resolve things in the
Yeah.
end, but I mean, that was just how I felt. I was really trying to help you in the only way that I could figure out how to at that point.
Yeah.
Because I know, yeah, it's like uncomfortable to talk about heated moments, but I have heated moments with my siblings all the time, and I did when we lived together. And a lot of the heated moments that I experienced were due to my mother. Um, like a little background, I'm the oldest of three, and my mother's narcissistic personality disorder depicted it as she thought she was the best mother that has ever fucking existed, right? She would go to the extreme of planning these massive parties, inviting a bunch of kids that I did not know. And then it would be like, oh, my beloved, you are the best child ever. My child is the best. And then you're worthless. You don't clean enough. The house is a mess and it's your fault. Making a lot of stimuli that were not my fault, my fault. And so she is a hoarder, like a massive hoarder, like a 4-horse barn, like set the back of a semi truck, the shipping container, a 4-horse barn, and a shipping container are both in our backyard. Still, I'm pretty sure, full of just stuff. And I constantly grew in chaos where there was just stuff everywhere all the time. And I am a creative, was a creative. And so I made a lot of YouTube videos growing up because that's what I really wanted to do, wanted to direct movies. And so I made my own little movies. And you can see in the background of every single video that I ever made, just piles and piles of stuff all the time. And so it instilled in me that now, as an adult, I can throw anything away, anything at all. Like things, I really had to learn how to have things that were sentimental to me because I was so used to my dad's mother, my Mimi, coming in and just throwing everything away. Anything on the floor, she would just throw it away. And so she thought that would teach us kids that the opposite of our mother, that if there's things on the ground that shouldn't be on the ground, either you put it away or I throw it away. And if you don't put it away in a timely manner, it's thrown away. Something that I was taught constantly was a slow obey is a no obey by both my mom, my dad, and my Mimi. And there was just a lot of control and a lot of chaos all at the same time. And within myself as an adult, whenever I see things that need to get done and they're not getting done quick enough, it stresses me the fuck out. I get so stressed. Like if there's a single dish in the sink, that makes me like panic and anxiety, that I fear like I'm going to get yelled at by my mom. Because even though maybe I didn't make that dish or I just put it down, I immediately have to wash it because of the way she raised me. And you guys were talking about previously that your father yelled a lot, and yelling at a child immediately dysregulates their nervous system immediately and puts them into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. A lot of people don't talk about fawn enough, but from my perception of Johnny, I do feel like he fawns. Do you fawn sometimes, Johnny?
I feel like there needs to be like a picture of Bambi up, like you know, like in the supercut, the edit. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's one of my yeah, sympathetic nervous system responses is fawn for sure. People who experience yeah, DV from a parent can you know, can have that and yeah, so I do that as well, like trying to get people to like me, trying to placate by whatever means necessary in order to uh, avoid conflict or expediently resolve conflict. And something I was thinking about in your share as well, like the chaos of your household. Like, I don't think that our dad yelled a ton. Like we weren't, there wasn't always screaming and yelling in our household. It was more of this like omnipresent feeling of intimidation and fear that that on occasion would explode, but like you're walking on eggshells every other day of the week, every other hour of the day, and not sure what's going to happen. So the uncertainty there is what really creates the sense of dysregulation, not like it's 24/7 screaming, crying, violence and stuff. And in our house, my dad enforced all of the rules. He set the energetic precedent, and his rule was universal. And he was right about everything. And he understood the way that the world worked. And he was telling you the verbatim truth about everything whenever he was sharing something, and you better listen. And as someone who was very scared of him and conflict avoidant, but where that created conflict for Emily and I from a sibling perspective is because she is more fiery and like pushing up against him. She was more willing to go against his rules and like, you know, push against, yeah, like what he said was true or his treatment of us or whatever. She would be much more willing to point out like, hey, that's like BS, or like fight him basically like on stuff, which in my perspective at the time in our dynamic was creating conflict, because if there was no one to push back against his rule, then
Right.
then I would only have to anticipate like his explosions kind of, but like you were again pushing back and setting boundaries because it was unacceptable treatment, but from my childhood eyes that's creating additional conflict, and
Right.
so you're the cause of that in my eyes, which
Yeah.
which is where that resentment started to build, is like not only am I really terrified of my dad and want him to just like me and approve of me, and you know but now there's this additional frequency happening of like conflict, which is even like less safe. And so that's where I think yeah, the resentment just like started to build up, and something that you and I have talked about, and only recently in like the recent years have come to eye to eye on, where you've acknowledged, is like the reason why I was also more scared of him than you growing up is because the way that he kind of abused us was pretty unique, like each of us in the family. And since there's the like father-son gender dynamic, it is a lot more acceptable to like abuse boys in like a physical intimidation way So I was a lot more scared of being like hit or pushed down or like put into an arm bar or like hurt. So that's what I thought. Like if an explosion was coming, I was really scared of like what would happen to my like childhood body. Whereas like an explosion for you, I think would be like lots of yelling. And you can handle that because you're like tough and like you're willing to like never back down. But so the connotations of those things, not to say he did not abuse you in that way, but
Right.
like a couple years ago, we had our first conversation where you were like,
Yeah.
it was worse for you in that way. So that's really for a lot of our childhood, even through teenage years. Because he was abusive to me in that way, like up until I left the house when I was 17. That's where my fear was coming from, and what exacerbated my resentment towards you is I like creating more conflict, creating more opportunities for there to be dysregulation, for him to potentially be like violent towards me, and that was just like super, super scary for me.
Yeah.
Emily, love, I want to ask you a question
Go for it.
because I noticed Johnny said that you could handle it better than he could. I don't think that's true. I think you guys handle it in a different way, but I don't think it's true at all that you were handling it better than him.
Yeah.
Though you guys were abused in different ways, I want to stress this. You were equally abused.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you, love, in what ways do you think that you and Johnny were pitted against each other from your perspective?
I think, I mean, very much the ways that you've already described.
I got some extra ways.
I think that from my perspective, I wasn't intentionally trying to challenge him or fight with him. I really, I mean, I did have kind of a gut feeling that what he was trying to impose on us or say about us was not okay. Like that, I did have that internal feeling, but I had a lot of neurological issues at the time. And so I had no way of being clear or fully able to communicate what I was feeling or what I was trying to get across. And so a lot of my like fight response was more, I think, a fawn response because I was trying to, because everything
Like divert attention towards
yeah,
you.
well, no,
Or
not necessarily, but like for such a long time, it was like no matter what I did, I was always at fault for something.
yeah.
Like it was always my fault for so many of the problems that we had around the house.
Yeah.
And so my like fighting, I think, was really just me trying to be like, no, I'm actually trying to be a good daughter, a good
Yeah.
sister,
Like
like
defend yourself.
yeah. And I think it came across as me trying to challenge him because my existence alone challenged him.
Yeah.
Because just me as I was conflicted with what he was teaching us to be.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then I do think that at some point, like towards like senior year for me for high school, I really just like something snapped in me and I didn't care anymore that I didn't try to appease our dad anymore after that point because in senior year I tried to kill myself by overdosing on ibuprofen and when sorry I was in the hospital for 3 days. And when I got back, I had written a note, kind of a goodbye to my mom and to my brother, but I also addressed a passage to our dad saying, like, he's the reason that I wanted to die because of his treatment towards me. And I, uh, at the end, said, Mom, John, I hope he treats you better without me there. And I believe you were the one who found that. But the moment that changed for me was when I came back and back home from the hospital, and our dad pulled me aside late in the evening. It was just the two of us. He handed me the note and he told me that I needed to burn it because it was my own fault that he treated me that way. And that was I believe, the first time that he actually admitted that a lot of what he had done was intentional. And at that point I was like, oh, I see. It doesn't matter how much I try and fit what he wants me to be. It's never going to be enough for him to treat me decently because he's doing this on purpose. And at that point, I think I really did start like actually fighting him and challenging him on purpose and antagonizing him. But I still, in a lot of ways, like tried to keep you out of that so that it was just between me and him. But that didn't work because he kept like drawing everybody into the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
I
very horrible.
think yeah, it wasn't great.
Yeah. I have an additional answer for that too, that question of like how he like pitted us against one another.
Mm.
I that was a big share too though. Take a breath for that one. That was really, really hard. And I did get home when you guys were at the hospital and like find your note and
Yeah.
stuff. And I did not know that at the time until years later that he like made you burn it. I think he probably told me or us from an optics perspective. He might have taken me aside at some point and like tried to spin the story as if it's inspiring. Like he made you burn your letter because it's, he wanted you, yeah, like
Really?
he wanted you to like triumph over the dark thoughts contained in the letter. Like that,
Wow.
that's kind of like his, you know what I'm saying? Because he tried to keep
Yeah.
that poem like Desiderata, like never always keep
Right.
going. Like that was his vibe of like
Yeah.
kind of saying like, well, if you're hurting or if something's bad, it's because like you never give up. It's just because you're not like
Right.
you can overpower your
Right.
feelings. And so I think that was like, while that's a very chilling and sinister interaction for you to have had with him, and him coaching you when you had to go see a psychiatrist after that to say like
Yeah.
of what to say and burning the evidence, right? It's burning evidence.
Right.
To, that same story from his mouth into other ears is like, I wouldn't like, I don't want that letter to exist and like for those things to be real for her mind. Like I want her to be able to overcome or whatever, right? Like
Right.
so
That's so interesting. I never knew
but
that.
the way that I think he started to triangulate from when I was like 10 is he would basically weaponize proximity to women, like my mom and Emily, against me and shame me and masculinity and like say that that was kind of a black mark on my like boyhood and maleness. So basically like saying things like I'm a mama's boy and like I have my mom wrapped around my finger, or um yeah, like closeness with my mom and sister was really criticized. At the same time, in other situations, trying to bully me and say that I'm like a pussy, or I'm not strong enough, I can't hold things properly with my hand, like I'm not resistant to pain, I cry too much, like stop that crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Like those types of things were drilled into me at, concurrently with like, oh, what are you going to do? Like talk to your mom, or like women are all like X, Y, and Z. So he really started to, from an early age, paint this picture to me of all of women and all of femininity as this like negative thing to distance myself from, attacked my sense of identity, like gender identity as a boy, and then also conflated, if I decide to stay close to my mom and my sister, it will further compromise this thing that already he doesn't see as good enough in me. So for me, that started to make me feel super, super isolated and like even further like emotionally neglected and unsafe and like not close to you or mom. Like I couldn't have closeness. And a lot of these things, like when we started school together and you wanted to bring me into your friend group, like all of these things that could have made us spend more time together in like that to me was like proximity with femininity. It would have been another piece of ammunition for
Mm.
him to, I didn't want that. I wanted to seek male approval because if
Right.
not his, then others in school. And that liberating moment for you where you realize, oh, there's nothing that he'll never treat me well. I really applaud you and feel inspired and proud of you and impressed and amazed that you arrived at that realization at 18 or 19 or however old. Because for me, it took a lot longer. Like I felt like I was still under that like narcissistic like spell,
Mm.
seeking his approval for all the way up until I was like 21, which is another reason for a rift between us, because if she took the horse blinders and the veil off at 19 and I was 16 or 17, and it took me another, you know, 4 years where I was still really basing my life decisions and trying to like align with my dad and like seek his approval. That created a pretty big rift, and it made me feel like I needed to choose sides. And I had this such a strong pull to like really want to choose my dad's side because maybe that's what would finally get him to approve of me, acknowledge me, and say that I'm enough. And it never came. But yeah, that was a pretty big thing.
I think another way is that he really drilled into your head that whatever we were saying, we were hysterical and emotional.
Yes.
And that was, I think, a really big factor in why it took so long for you to get to the point where you were like, I need to be emotionally intelligent for my own health
Yeah.
and for my relationships with my family. Because for so long, like having any kind of emotion, like I don't know if you remember, but every time I would have those kinds of like fights with him, I would sob the entire time
Yeah.
because I was so overwhelmed and I was doing everything I could to like appease him, to like make him not be mean anymore. And I think that like because he would force you and mom to sit in when I was having a fight with
Yeah.
him.
Family discussions.
Yeah, family discussions. And so I think it drilled into your head for so long that anytime mom and I were emotional, but I think more so me, it was this like really, really negative thing.
Yeah. All
Um,
women are hysterical, and
yeah,
like I have to take everything that you say, any woman says, whether it's our neighbor, Teresa, like one of our aunts, our grandmother, mom, or you, like take it with a grain of salt,
Right.
basically. And the only reason why I would be so affected by your opinions is because like it's my mother. Like, and if I was
and
a
we're
rational,
brainwashing
yeah,
you.
and you're brainwashing me. And if I was a rational man, like if I was a real man, if I was one
Right.
of the boys, I would be able to take a step back and say like it's like this is just how all women are, and it's my closeness again. It's the fact that it's my mother. It's the fact that it's my
Right.
sister telling me this, which is why it upsets me. And that was just like such a mind fuck for me for so long. Yeah.
I want to applaud you both for having that introspective conversation.
Thank you.
It was good.
Yeah.
That's honestly, I am really inspired by you guys because it seems like you are having a closeness. I noticed that when Love started to cry, that you moved into her and wrapped your arm around her and held her hand. That was beautiful. It was very lovely. And I love how you guys are both closer together. You were a couple inches apart a few minutes ago, but now you're a lot closer. And I really appreciate that. Um, Love, does that help you whenever Johnny puts his arm around you or touches you whenever you are feeling dysregulated?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that like we were denied for so long, like having that closeness.
Yeah.
And like just the physical closeness is such a big deal for us. And we've talked a lot about it because that's something that like that's a very big love language for you.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about it because for me that has definitely shifted. Because there was a period of like 2 or 3 years where I was mostly bedbound and I was completely isolated. The only person that I talked to or even saw for months on end was my mom. And so I got really unfamiliar with physical affection. And so it was very uncomfortable for me for a really long time. But now it's like it's so warm and lovely, and I feel so comforted, you know, whenever we hug or like cuddle on
Yeah.
the couch or things like that. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
grateful.
Yeah, that's what got me emotional just now. I was just thinking of like, yeah, we were like robbed of that. Like that was like
Yeah.
stolen from us for a really long time. Yeah. And it's not spoken about enough. And then it's like normalized as adults in our culture, like our patriarchal culture, to like not have physical affection or closeness
Yeah.
with, especially with an opposite gender sibling, too. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a long journey.
That's something I am honestly envious, because I remember when my brothers and I would hug and cuddle, and when my brothers would have nightmares and they would sneak into my bed and sleep next to me. I did miss
He's
that.
such words.
That would happen all the time.
Yeah.
And I do miss it. You know, my brothers are 22 and 19, and they're both in college right now. And, you know, I miss being able to hug my brothers. And the opposite was true for my dad. My dad loved hugs. My dad loved closeness. My dad, whenever me and my brothers would have a disagreement or a tiff, not a big one, he'd be like, okay, now hug. And he was a big man. So he would like not force us, but there was no escape. You had to hug. You had to hug. And that really did help me. Um, and it helped me feel safe. Being close is a way that I feel a lot more regulated. And, you know, love, I can relate with you. When I was 15, I had a suicide attempt, and my mother called me an embarrassment and sent me away to live with my grandparents, and told me that I embarrassed her, that the cops were at her house, that I was having demons in my head, that she didn't know who I was, that I wasn't her daughter, that her daughter wouldn't act that way. And it's very horrible to be treated that way. When we're at that lowest point in life, we need to be embraced.
Mm.
We need to be shown the truth that we do matter, that our lives do have meaning, and that our pain is real. When we are denied that our pain is real, I feel like that is one of the most evil things you can do to a person. And I'm very, very sorry that that happened to you. And I'm glad that you have your brother who is now able to affirm to you that your pain is real, that, you know, the triangulation that your dad tried to do with your brother, being like, oh, you know, I fixed the problem, don't even worry about it. And I'm sure it wasn't really allowed to be discussed after that, was it? It
Yeah,
was
no, we
like,
didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
And my mom and my dad, like they all three of you guys really just didn't talk to me for like weeks afterwards. It was very like everybody was on eggshells, like very, very quiet. And I think honestly, like that period of time was a little bit euphoric for me almost, because I was like, holy shit, there's not this, I mean, there's still tension, but nobody's directing their anger at me anymore. And I mean, it didn't last, but for a couple of weeks there, it was almost freeing. And then it kind of started to trickle back in where um, things kind of got more involved and got worse again. And I think you and I had a pretty large fight around that time, or like a couple of months into it. Um, and it was a very difficult time, but like we didn't talk about it at all as a
Yeah.
family. Like it was completely, but we didn't talk about it whatsoever.
Nope.
yeah, they didn't talk about what happened to me either. It was like I was sent away to Mimi camp for 6-8 months, almost a year. And then suddenly I came back and I was Cinderella yet again. I was forced to do everything for my family yet again. And no one ever asked me, my brothers never asked me, are you okay? My dad never asked me, are you okay? How can I help? And it's very, very frustrating thinking back on that time of just isolation and being sent away to my Jamaican grandparents to fix me, because what broke me was my mother's way of treating me like I was her minion. We were called her minions all the time. We were told to do her bidding. And the way that I really started to differentiate was being at Mimi and Papa's house and recognizing that, yes, I do have chores, but I had so much more autonomy over what I wanted to do, what I wanted to learn, because I was also homeschooled. What I wanted to do, what I wanted to learn, how I wanted to express myself. And it really helped me a lot. I felt very safe at Mimi and Papa's house. And I had a very good relationship, even if I didn't agree with my grandparents, which I still don't entirely, but I never felt disrespected. But at my house, I was constantly disrespected, demeaned for any of my opinions. And it's very unfortunate because my mother did pit specifically my middle brother against me constantly over who was the smartest, who got the better grades, who did the most extracurricular activities, who was going to get their associate's degree first. And it happened again when I went to Texas Tech, which was her alma mater. I wasn't allowed to apply to any other schools. Wasn't allowed. We visited other schools. She gave the illusion of, oh, you could go here. But every time we went to another school, she badmouthed that school about how it didn't compare to Texas Tech. And so in high school, I got my associate's degree, and my mother pushed my brother to do it as well. So we were in the same classes, which she tried to pit us against each other of being like, who's going to do better? You, like, who's going to like get the better grades? And it constantly felt like I had to prove myself, that I had to prove my worth, that I had to prove that I was smarter than my brother, which in a lot of ways, especially science and math, he trumps me every freaking time. Every time. There was no way that I could ever measure up, which is okay because we have our differences and that's beautiful. He has a very analytical mind, but he's also very argumentative. So whenever I had a problem, he would argue with me about how I was stupid for having that problem. If I needed help with something and we were in the same class and I came to him and be like, I don't understand how to do this question. He'd be like, you're so dumb. And he learned that from our mother because she would say that all the time of, you're just dumb. Stop being dumb. You're
Ugh.
being stupid. Stop being stupid. Just get it already. And now as adults, when I finally, because I want to start getting into like how you guys stopped interacting with your dad, because I know both of you don't interact with him anymore. For me, how I stopped interacting with my mother was as soon as I went to Texas Tech, and started to recognize, holy shit, nobody else's mom treats them this way. A light bulb went off in my head of being like, wait, so you guys don't have to go home every weekend to clean your house to stay in school? And they're like, what? You guys don't have to drive 10 hours a weekend to clean your house? They're like, huh? And the first weekend of college, I was a theater major. I had auditions and I texted my dad. I was like, I'm turning my phone off. I'm in auditions. My dad's like, ace it, kill it, break all the legs. When I turned my phone back on, I had 53 missed calls from my mother about, where are you? Why aren't you home yet? Why are you in auditions? you need to be home cleaning. I'm going to remove all of your funds from college. You're not getting your ride to college anymore. You're disobedient. And I didn't think she'd follow through, but she did. And the second weekend of school, or not the weekend, but the Friday, the assistant dean came into my classroom, which was super embarrassing, pulled me out and said, you haven't paid for your tuition and you're going to need to pack up your things. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Also, Gigi is over here. Comfort. I don't know if you see her. Hold on. Gigi head. She's doing the grumble that she does whenever she senses I'm elevated because she's my service dog. Anyway, she's letting me know I'm elevated. So he pulls me out. He says, your mom is not on your FAFSA. You don't even have FAFSA paperwork. I'm like, what? I remember sitting there with both my parents filling out that FAFSA paperwork. And I had scholarships because of the FAFSA paperwork because my parents didn't have a lot of money, right? So I almost had a full ride from scholarships alone, but she removed herself from the FAFSA. So all of my scholarships got taken away. And so I call my dad, and my dad's like, go radio silent. Don't talk to your mom. I'll figure it out. And that's when I broke down in the hallway, just sobbing my eyes out because it felt like everything that I had ever worked for was being taken away. And I would be forced to move back home and be her slave yet again, because I was literally her slave. And COVID happened. I know Gigi. I don't know if you can hear her, but she's talking up a storm. COVID happened. And I broke down again because my dad solved the payment issue. He had to make his own separate bank account, and I couldn't have a FAFSA. So my dad had to like pay out of pocket for my tuition because my mom wouldn't put herself on the FAFSA because they were married, which is bullshit. Anyway, so my dad had to like secretly pay for my school. When COVID happened, the school shut down, and I broke down in theater practice because I would have to go home and face my mother. And as soon as I got home, she would not let me in the house. I was not allowed in the house because I disobeyed her. So my dad, he had a trailer RV. So he hooked it up to the house, and that's where I lived for all of COVID. And the only times I was allowed in the house, she would sequester herself in her room. I would have to clean to live there, clean her house, but I wasn't allowed to sleep in her house, wasn't allowed to stay in her house, but I was allowed to clean it, which is crazy.
That's
Insane.
wow. Oh, you poor thing.
I'm okay, but my dad was hit by a car in June 2020, and that's where her control really amped up. And she found the bank accounts that he made that he called My Dad is Awesome. Literally, the bank account was called My Dad is Awesome. And she saw that he was giving me money every week for expenses at school and also paying my tuition. And so she came up with like $15,000 saying that I stole that from her, that I stole money from her, and started to abuse me further to the point where I had to now make a case for the dean of admissions for me to go back to school because my dad couldn't pay for it because he was hospitalized and he eventually died from his injuries. Of my mom is abusive, and I had to, because in Texas you're not legally adult, or you can't legally pay for your own tuition until you're 25. Like they still count your parents' tuition. And so I had to emancipate myself and prove that I could pay off my loans and how much money I made and et cetera, and that my mother was abusive. And that didn't take a lot because the evidence was all there. The evidence was all there. The constant like barrage of horrible, hateful text messages were all there. And when I went back to college, I decided then and there I was not going to be subjected to her abuse anymore. That no matter if I was homeless or not, because she did make me homeless, that I would figure it the fuck out for myself and not constantly be under her thumb or do what she wanted me to do. And still to this day, I don't fucking talk to her. After my dad died, she refused to go to his funeral. I don't fucking talk to her. She remarried a much younger guy on the anniversary of my dad's funeral in the same place that she married my dad. I don't fucking talk to her. It got to that level of insanity that I was just like, all right, my hands are up. Can't do anything about it. There's nothing I could do to change her mind, that I have value, like you were saying, love, that I have value. I don't to her. I am a tool to her. And therefore, I was like, so I want to bring it back to you guys. What was that breaking point for you guys of being like, I don't want to be around this person anymore. This is not good.
Well, I think she said earlier that her initial breaking point of realizing like there's nothing she can do to appease him and like stop that was probably like the end of high school for her. But what's kind of interesting and maybe unique about our situation is that like my dad actually like abandoned our family. So we never, as a collective, like my mom, my sister, and I set a boundary with him to like you're gone. Like he did this over the course of several years, really piecemeal like departure with some significant individual events. And so like throughout our high school experience, when you were suffering from undiagnosed chronic illnesses that affected your neurology, like your gastrointestinal, like all of this stuff, which affected so much of your life, he tried to like gaslight her and convince her and us that she was hypochondriac. She had Munchausen syndrome. She was, hysterical. She's just not tough enough. He knows what toughness is because he's a special forces veteran that's been tortured and been in war, and so he really knows what real pain is. And so like she's just exaggerating. And then when when I went away to college and she finally was older than 18 and both of us were adults, he did everything he could to no longer have to provide financially, like now that we were no longer minors. So when I was in my freshman year of college, he just moved out one day, like from my mom's house. But the way that I say it's kind of piecemeal, like kind of like slimy, and never direct, is he did it while my mom was at work, making like $8 an hour minimum wage at Rite Aid while also going to school part time. And my sister was there. And I mean, I'll just concisely say, like, he just started packing his stuff. And then he moved to what we now know is like his mistress, like who he was cheating on my mom with for many years, that we all were in denial about. And then because we never talked about stuff in our family unit, like my mom and sister told me that that had happened, but he did not tell me until months later, like in person. He didn't say that that happened. And when he did tell me, he was like, well, I just couldn't be around your mom and sister anymore. They're just like such hateful people. And I'm not even living with Anne. I'm living in her driveway. I'm living in my trailer and my camper in the driveway. So it's just because I couldn't handle being around your mom and sister. Like that's why I've done this. It doesn't mean I don't like love you guys anymore. And that was when I was 18. And then a year or two passes and I don't know what's going on because I stay at college and I don't really come home very often. But throughout that course of time, he like then eventually moves into the house, right? And then when I finally did see him at one point, almost towards when we cut off contact, he was like, oh well, it's just because of my health issues. Like I'm experiencing health issues and it's winter time, so I like am now living in the house. Obviously, like there's always an excuse for him like distancing himself further and further from our family and like integrating further and further with his now his girlfriend, like and it never to compromise his image as this like loving family man, which he never was for our entire lives, but like it's all about the perception management. And months in between when something would happen and then when he would tell me about it so that he could control the narrative and make me think like it wasn't all that bad. So I think for you guys at some point, like in 2017 or 18, when he was gone living over there and was not really providing financially and was just, like had abandoned you guys, like you guys were like done with him, but very much recovering from his abuse still and feeling very activated. Like my mom had to drive past him and his girlfriend's house every day to get to work and school. And he has this like huge truck. He has a lot of vehicles. He has this huge, big, like Unimog, Mercedes-Benz Unimog that so you can see it, like, so she had to see that every day in like this other woman's driveway. And then for me, my breaking moment was when I was 21. I was studying abroad in Shanghai, China, and I realized that several of my peers who were on the study abroad program, like they had healthy, normal relationships with their parents. And one, because he was quite privileged, his parents even went so far as to come and visit him from Maryland to China, like Shanghai. They like flew there to like visit their son, and they took us all out to dinner. And his dad was amazing, and his like on the side, his mom was like, yeah, like, Sam's dad has been sober since I got pregnant with his oldest sibling. Like just from that day, he like just, not that he had an alcohol problem, but he was just like in solidarity, like never drank again. And he's always the life of the party. And he came out clubbing with us, sober style, but like dancing. It was just amazing, that. And so I was exposed in real time to like another person's good dad, and it floored me. I was like, oh my God. So I came back from studying abroad in China. I wanted to surprise my mom and sister by being home earlier than I told them I would be for the holidays. And so I asked my dad to come pick me up from the airport, but I sent him like a no worries, if not text, I can ask my friend Jacob. I didn't want to be, you never want to be an imposition for your narcissistic parent. And he said he would pick me up. He came and picked me up. And in the car ride home from the airport, like literally while still at the airport, pulling away from it, that is when he starts to, instead of asking me like how my trip was, or like I haven't seen you in 7 months because I was there for a really long time, he was like, oh, by the way, I'm getting a dissolution of marriage with your mother. It's not because I don't love her. It's just, it's cheaper than a divorce. It's just because, we're moving in different directions, or like some weird excuse, when Mom and Emily had already called me and told me that like 3 months earlier when I was in China. But they were like, your dad doesn't want us to tell you. So I had known this about him. But the way that he was telling the narrative and telling me in that moment was very different from what they told me. So now, as a more fully formed 21-year-old young man, I'm starting to like see these very apparent like holes in his stories that he tells me when we're alone, versus what like both my mom and my sister and my aunt. And like all of a sudden I'm just like, the math ain't mathing. There's just numbers wise way more people telling me a similar story, like the same thing, versus like what you're telling me. And so following that, and then he before he dropped me back off at their house that night. So like the night I've just got home from a 13-hour like cross the world flight, he takes me to his girlfriend's house because he wants to like chat with me, and he literally framed it as like man to man. I want to just chat with you man to man. I want to like get to know the man you're becoming. And he sits me down and he like breaks out a whiskey bottle, and he like tries to be this like cool, like, oh, I have this like weed vape, do you want to try this? Do you smoke? And I was like, I'm good. I was very uncomfortable. And he proceeds to just like ask me some kind of pointed questions about my time abroad, but I can tell from like the narcissism level, he's like proud of me being this now tall, like more muscular, archetypal male who's been an adventurer. I've been abroad. I've got life experience. I'm doing cool things. I was on a prestigious State Department scholarship, so like I reflect better on him. So now he's like willing to to acknowledge me man to man. And through this conversation, which was like a couple hours, I was exhausted, but he admitted to me that like he never liked me growing up. He was like, yeah, I didn't like you when you were a kid. That's why I treated you that way. Because I felt brave enough to tell him, like, it seemed like when I left for college, and even now, Dad, you're treating me better than you ever have. Like, I felt like for the longest time you never liked me when I was a boy. And he's like, I didn't like you. You sulked all the time. You were like, you were hard to be around. And then what else he said is that he was like, I don't know, just a bunch of different stuff of that nature. And then he dropped me back at my mom and sister's house. I was able to like surprise them. That was really sweet. But the wheels started turning from this like 2 to 3 hour conversation that I had with him, where he was like, yep, I never fucking liked you, which was so vindicating. It like, as a 21-year-old, I was like, oh my God, this feeling I've been carrying around for my whole life, where I was pretty sure you were so mean to me because you didn't like me. Like it felt the same way bullies in school. I was like, this person does not like me. That's how I felt since I was 3 about my own father, and I could never describe it. So that felt very validating and vindicating. And again, the story is not aligning up of why he's left. The things my mom and sister are saying. So a week or two after that, still on Christmas break in my senior year of college, I went back to him and I started asking him questions about his story. I was like, hey, you told me that in the marriage dissolution, you weren't going to bring a lawyer to the proceedings. And then mom said there was a lawyer that showed up and that she had to get questioned in front of the entire court. Is she pregnant? Like, there's these very embarrassing, intrusive questions by this lawyer that was quite aggressive. And my dad tried to frame it as like he got so mad, like immediately he got so aggressive with me me asking these questions. And we were driving together because I was supposed to borrow his car to drive back to college. And we were driving from the gas station to fill it up with gas. So I'm asking these questions. I'm driving. He's in the passenger seat next to me. And I'm like, you said you weren't going to bring a lawyer. Mom said you did. Like, and he's like, watch how you talk to me, boy. Like he always called me like boy. And I could tell like the aggression was flaring up. And so I get a little hysterical myself, honestly. Like I'm getting activated and I'm like, no, because you said this, and like starting to argue a little bit. And we're closing in on returning to his girlfriend's house. We're on that road, and he gets to the point where he's just like, watch how you fucking talk to me, boy. All right, pull over the car. And I knew that like what he's saying is like right here in the street, pull over, we're getting out, and like we're fighting. Like I'm gonna beat your ass because you're, being so disrespectful. And so I pulled over, and this is very quick thinking on my part. I pretended to take off my seatbelt. So he took off his seatbelt and he got out of the car. And then I just drove away because I was like,
Legendary, by
yeah.
the way.
Because yeah, dude, I mean, he like has a handgun on him most times. He has like 2 knives on him. He's an ex-special forces veteran. He's very violent to me and to like us, and talking about killing and torturing people and all these things. And so I was terrified of him. And I was like, I'm not, even though I was 21 and I was, big and bigger, I still had that like immense fear. I was like, and I also don't want to like fight my father. That's so traumatic. So yeah, I drove away sobbing. And he tried to call me a ton of times. He said he would call the police on me and report the car stolen, which he has done in the past. He has like threatened to take me to jail and things like that. So I knew that he would like do that. So I left the car in a spot. I like sobbed on the phone to yell at him and tell him like where it was, and I never want to speak to him again and stuff. And um, it was yeah. So he came and picked up the car, and that was the last time I ever saw him in person. So that was my defining moment, is this like near physical altercation as an adult with my dad, where just like asking him questions about his narrative on our family life was enough to bring him to like want to be violent with me. And that like tore off the blinders. And he called me on the phone like 6 weeks later in February. And I could hear his girlfriend in the background. So he's like, I'm calling you because I just wanted to see if you want to take this trip with me, because there's this TV show that I might do. It's so weird and random. He's not in the entertainment industry, but he just said that there was this like Amazon series that a producer wanted to make about him and his old military buddies in Southern Africa, where he was in the military. And they, he was like, I don't know why, but they started asking me if I have family, and they asked me specifically about my son. They didn't ask me about my daughter or my wife. I don't know why, but I told them I had a son. And so they asked me if he would consider coming with me on the trip, and we could make part of the docu-series, like the father-son bonding. So that's why I'm calling you. And then his girlfriend was in the background of the call, was like, and because you love him. And he's like, and because I love you. And it was so weird because he did not acknowledge the fight that we had. He didn't acknowledge we hadn't spoken in 6 weeks. He was just saying like, hey, do you want to come on this random international, like, I don't know if this is true or not, right? But and so I said, I'll think about it. And I hung up, and that was the last time I spoke to him on the phone. So from there, I started to distance myself. And I know I'm being very, very long-winded in this story, but that was in February of 2019. So that was the last time. And then since then, there were like in that summer some email exchanges to start really separating our lives. Like I took over paying the phone bill in 2019 for my mom, sister, and I, and got a new cell phone number. I blocked him on all my emails and like social medias and stuff. I started to just not respond and go no contact with him. And they had kind of already done that. They didn't block him, but because my sister and my mom were just like, oh, we'll ignore. But yeah, so it's been since then. And he recently found me again. And even though I changed my name and like, so that's been a really cool thing in the last week, and also yesterday, that he's been emailing me. nothing has changed. The same
Hmm.
stuff he's saying in email, like he broke out a, be a man, and like, uh, yeah, like you're a liar, like your narrative, or I don't know. So, yeah, so we're no contact. I haven't responded, but that's kind of where things are. None of us have a relationship with him.
Yeah. That's so shit. I'm proud of you though.
I'm proud of me. I'm proud of us. It's
Yeah.
been
What steps have you begun to take to heal your relationship with each other?
He moved back in last year. That was a really big step. Um, yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of very long, very deep conversations about our individual experiences with the abuse and also our shared experiences with the abuse. Um, I don't, I feel like I kind of have always tried to, um, like reach out to you and foster a relationship, but I don't think that I think that there has been like some difficulty for you along the way of doing that, but I don't know what the
Yeah.
turning point for you was for that.
Well, because when I cut him off, it felt so significant. It felt
Mm,
like I was like choosing you and mom. And by doing so, I was choosing to no longer have a dad, which was extremely like grief stricken for me. And it also rocked my world because I had built up my worldview up until age 21 on a lot of the lessons about life and masculinity and
right.
things like that that he had taught. So it was literally, it felt for me at age 21 like my entire world value system, understanding of what's real, because all of his lies started to come out and I started to think more about them. Like it just came crashing down, and I was starting from not just like emotional and identity zero, but like what is anything. And that resentment still flared up of like, I know it's the right thing to do and in line with my values of choosing you and mom, but it does feel like the cost of choosing you guys. Like, so it's your guys's, fault or whatever that I have to not choose to not have a
Mm,
dad. So I was holding on to that for a while and just like processing. And I had never been to therapy. Like I started going to therapy. I was working. I just got an internship at a domestic violence center. So there were a lot of things actively happening in my life too that meant I was not ready to reconcile my own wounds, let alone navigate that with you.
mm,
And in the early years of me starting to come back and visit you and mom, if we would have conversations about stuff, it caused conflict because we
yeah,
weren't seeing eye to eye. And it was like we were so fresh from the experience with him that we really needed each of our like versions to be validated and true. And
right.
so that's something I've noticed over the years of continuing to have those conversations and also healing individually, is that when we talk about our individual experiences, there's much more close alignment and agreement of like, oh, like that did happen, or I like, yes, that is the dynamic, or so it has taken a long time to get to that point. So that's my advice for other people who are in the recovery, is to understand that it takes many years to get to the point where you can have those conversations with your sibling and you'll start to see eye to eye. It's also okay if you don't see eye to eye on things or at all, because as you pointed out earlier, Grace, sometimes perception is going to be different, but what's important is what do you want your relationship to look like moving forward?
Mm,
And then another piece of advice I have is like definitely go to individual therapy. And like I've been going to therapy weekly for a year now, like every week. That my sister helped me find this therapist. And I went, it's someone who specializes in people who have experienced domestic violence as children. So I'm not just going to a regular therapist. I didn't just call up BetterHelp, no shade to those services. But I think especially for men, we have this perception that if I'm going to therapy, I'm doing it, right? But like, no, there's bad therapists, just like there's bad teachers, just like there's bad coaches. There's therapists that specialize in certain things. And you need to really be deliberate about what you're going to therapy to heal from and like what would be most helpful for you. And so that, I mean, that's also another big answer, is like you as the sister, as the woman, have always felt like you're there ready to stepped up to the plate and like receive me and reach out for that relationship. And it's been me that has not been ready yet. So as I've matured, started to do my own men's work, my own therapy, and like unlearn that patriarchal indoctrination that was the main feature of my mindset for so long. That's what has allowed us to now cultivate the dynamic we have now. Is a lot of like my individual healing too. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that even while you were not ready on your own, like you didn't believe that you're ready, and I might have believed I was ready and I wanted to fix that relationship, I don't think that I was ready for a really long time, because just as you said, I needed to do my own healing as well in order to no longer have that incredible anger that I held inside me for so long.
yeah,
Because you're right, like whenever we did come together during those years, every time it was a conflict.
yeah,
And I remember you would bring like every time you would come back from college to visit us, you would bring somebody with you.
yeah, like a
Because
girlfriend or yeah,
yeah, because you were so uncomfortable just having us alone as a family,
yeah,
that you needed some kind, like we needed some kind of buffer to be
yeah,
there. And I I think that was a really good move on your part, because I think it did really, really help to um really show us individually like how much miscommunication happens between us. Um
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's another great piece of advice for people is like if you're not ready to just sit with your feelings and have conversations with your family members or your siblings, try bringing one of your best friends around, or
Yeah.
like someone who knows you best, or a partner who knows who you are now and has like is experiencing that you've been doing the work, because
Somebody that you
like
feel comfortable with.
yeah, that third party or that proxy can actually facilitate more conversation, more understanding, more comfort, nervous system regulation
Mm.
in those dynamics. And then I always remember like going away, if it was with a girlfriend or a friend, and they're saying like your mom is awesome, your sister is so awesome, that helped me kind of see the light of like, oh, like I'm so uncomfortable around my mom and sister, but like they're not bad people or there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with them. So that's still part of the indoctrination of my dad's
Yeah.
narrative, because this other person, partner at a time, or ex that I love and respect, is corroborating that like my mom and sister are awesome people, like, and yeah, we got baggage and we got shit, but there's nothing wrong with them. So
Yeah.
that helped me question like, why do I have these feelings about this? And so yeah, it's over time bring in a third person.
I think it also really helps you to be able to see how your sibling or your family member interacts with the rest of the world, because you get to see a different side of them that you aren't always privy to. And I think that really helped for us in particular, because it was really like we didn't have a ton of experiences with each other out in public, like out in the rest of the world. Like it was always in very confined quarters in here, in like in this house, and on under very, very stressful, traumatic circumstances. So having that outside input of like even just the way that, just for example, John talks to his friends is so enlightening, because it like if you are so much more calm, and I mean we get along pretty great now, but you're a lot more open, and so it's really, not only I think does it train you to feel more comfortable in my presence, but it's also, we get to see how we interact with the rest of the world, and it helps reframe who we are to each other in our own minds.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I want to add some like insight, because I do consider myself Johnny's friend. Like, I don't know if I'm
I,
allowed, but like I
I think that's
do.
that's an accurate read.
Vibes. When Johnny talks about you, love, I can tell that he has an immense amount of respect and compassion for you. Like immense.
I believe
Where he would move hell and high water to take care of you. And he mentioned something to me that really struck something with me of like, if anything ever happens to my sister, I will be there for her. No matter if I'm married, have children, I'm going to make sure that I'm there for my sister. And I thought that was beautiful, truly beautiful. I am very proud of Johnny for also when he talks to me about you guys' conflicts, because he's like, well, I see some similarity between love and Grace, and I want to see Grace's insight on these things so that I can better equip myself to handle stressful situations with my sister. And I also think that's beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying
good
that.
egg. It's a good egg. He
Yeah.
says, teach you.
He's
Yeah.
the best egg, and he's got egg colored hair right now too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mans keeps shaving his head, and it makes me distressed that I can't do the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's another amazing thing is like do stuff together. So the daily things, like for a while, I haven't done this as much when I'm traveling a lot or when I'm really busy, because I do a lot, but like I tried to, because we live together, like sometimes I would tell, and I told Grace, I was like, I've been trying to hug my sister every day, like even if we only see each other for a little bit during the day, because I'm doing a lot, I'll like just try to hug you or say goodnight to you every day, like when I say goodnight to mom, and do things together. So this summer, something that was really fun is when I donated my hair and I had one of my high school students shave it, kind of immediately like arranged with you, because you dye your hair a lot and know a lot about like beauty and stuff. Um, Took a trip to Sally Beauty and you got the supplies to dye my hair so I could start that. And that's something that we did together a few
Yeah.
times. And then you kind of taught me. So now I do it like myself, but activities like that together. And then it also creates like a bonding moment where when people talk about my hair or compliment it or whatever, like that's a connection point where I say, well, like I'm never just like, oh yeah, cool, thanks. I'm like, oh yeah, like my big sister like went to Sally Beauty, like this, we did it together, she knows a lot about dyeing hair. So um uh yeah, like try to do things together and create moments, start going in public together. We go to the museum, events, concerts. We danced together for the first time in our lives, like kind of like
Yeah.
a slow dance earlier this summer at a friend of mine's band's concert. And so starting to create new memories and stories, and what my therapist and I call like corrective experiences that counteract the narrative that has been built about like the reality of your relationship or whatever, because it turns out that's just a narrative as well, and like new stories and things can emerge. And this is not to say everything is perfect, and I don't think healing or healed is a destination ever, like it's this constant journey, and like other things are going to flare up and complexities and conflict in our relationship. But I do feel that we have now built the foundation to handle that stuff way better. And as is evidenced by my July like mental health crisis, the time to repair is like so quick now.
Yeah,
Which it's not
definitely.
like silent treatment, like weeks or days or whatever of not talking. It's like hours of, okay, hey, like here's what's up.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
And I'm very proud of you for that. It does give me hope, because I know that my siblings are much younger than you guys are, but it gives me hope for whenever they do grow up and their frontal lobes do develop a little bit more, and maybe they're listening, watching, I don't know, maybe they are. They don't like being talked about, but I'm gonna talk about you right now. I love you. I miss you. I love my brothers with all my heart, and I really want to foster a closer relationship with them. And I want them to feel like it's okay to do so. There's still a lot of triangulation between, my mother and my brothers, because I don't talk to her at all. And my youngest brother is very enmeshed with her, baby, golden child, legitimately, with his golden curly hair. I love you. But he was always the favorite. And that isn't something I'm resentful of. It's just something I'm aware of. And it's very hard because he just wants everybody to get along. But when you have irreconcilable differences, it's impossible. Like, I genuinely know in my heart of hearts, my mother will not know my children. My mother is not allowed at my wedding that Johnny will be attending. Lucy, one second.
Yeah.
Lucy's being oh, there she is. Okay, good. She has this habit of, whenever she gets stressed, of trying to find something comfortable to pee on.
Classic.
I'd like You have it. She has 4 litter boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And she tries to pee on the couch.
Crazy. Cats, man. Cats. Gotta love them.
Anyway, I was talking about my mom.
Yeah.
I do love my mom. I don't like her. I don't like her choices. And I know that they're only going to hurt me further. Like any interaction with her is just going to trigger me. And I've gotten to the point where I recognize those triggers. And for me to be safe and not commit die is to be away from her. And I don't think a lot of people recognize the seriousness of that. That's a very serious thing. Has she ever physically harmed me? No. But she has spiritually harmed me, emotionally harmed me, mentally harmed me, what have you. And she does not agree with any of my life choices at all, including dyeing my hair, including living with my fiance out of wedlock, including, being open about my struggles on my podcast and talking about the way that she has treated me. She has made my life hell from the sidelines, even today, in ways that I can't talk about on this podcast because I'm just not going to give credence to it. I know that she is actively trying to sabotage my current life, and that's sad. That's fucked. But on the plus side, I think my brothers are starting to notice it. And as they're getting older, starting to recognize, wait, Grace isn't the problem. Grace is not doing anything at all. Grace is not in the sphere. And I think part of that took when my mom sent us on the anniversary of our dad's funeral, like a screenshot of her marriage license and like a whole text message just calling herself mama, which irks me to no end because you were never mama. I have never once called you that, but okay. Of her basically gaslighting us and telling us we don't have a relationship with her because of us, because we withdrew the relationship from her. We're not in her life because it's our fault.
Yeah.
And that sucks. But it's a reflection point of, my brothers. I do believe that once they are at a point where their frontal lobes have developed more, and they're out of college and they don't need her moolah, they're gonna see her for who she is. And if they choose to have a relationship with her, that's fine. That doesn't really affect me. But I need the triangulation to stop. I need them to stop telling me, go talk to mom. This would all be solved if you just talk to mom, because no, it wouldn't. It would be aggravated if I talked to her.
Yeah.
What are some resources and recommendations that you guys would like to share with the class?
Let me look up this one book that has been really helpful, and I can't remember the name.
For all of the guys out there, I would personally recommend Hey Brother Co. Just as someone who is looking at it from the outside, I think that they have developed a completely beautiful community there, full of people who are dedicated to healing, and not just internally, but with their family and their place in the world. And I think that there is some very powerful things happening within that organization.
Thank you.
And I think it could heal a lot of people.
I mean, I'm witness to it. I know it's helping my fiance, Joey. I know he loves it. He's so excited for tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess then I would second that. I think in both of our family stories, right, like what's needs to happen really is like the men in your family unit need to like heal and mature. And one of the best ways to do that is like through individual therapy and through men's work, like finding men, especially since they don't have their dad in their lives anymore, like to hold you accountable, finding men to hold you accountable, finding men to push you to be your best self, and have frank conversations and encourage you and support you to say like, hey, like, what is your relationship like with your sister right now, or like with your family, or that's done a ton for me in my life. And it kind of, it sucks because, you know, women around the world and eldest daughters around the world have been doing a lot of emotional labor and domestic labor on behalf of, you know, brothers or dads or uncles and people for so long. And it sucks to say like it's a waiting game. Like you really, like, you are waiting until something happens for your brothers where it's a light that turns on, and you can help accelerate the process. It's also not really your responsibility to do that because you've been doing a ton already. So that's where I'm like, yeah, you don't need to find a therapist or try to force your brothers to go to a men's circle. But maybe the hope that I'll give you and other listeners out there is, with narcissists in particular, it's just a matter of waiting, because stuff is like, karma is real and stuff comes out eventually. And I think with your brothers in particular, it'll be kind of as they, as you said, graduate college and no longer need her for certain things, and then find romantic partners. If that, there's going to be additional distractions away from, and what your mom will perceive as like barriers in their relationship. And that's when they're going to start to be like, this is so weird. I feel so uncomfortable like bringing my partner around like my mom, or she's criticizing this person that I really love, and that makes me feel conflicted because I'm not seeing these things that she keeps criticizing about and all of that. And so the onion will peel back, and eventually they'll realize what they do with that realization is up to them. And it's, you know, you did have a really amazing dad, and who's sounds like just a loving man of integrity, and I hope they're going to follow in his example in many ways. But it, yeah, I just like can't recommend men's work enough, and healing, like healed men are what the world needs right now. And they, you know, there's nothing that's been more fulfilling to me in my life than having a better relationship with you and mom, and like feeling a sense of purpose in our family, and not feeling a sense of disconnection. And it's like a currency almost now that I value so much more than a lot of things that many of my peers find, and many other men I think in the world find to be of value and a measure of success. Is like, I feel super grounded and confident in the fact that my family loves me, like I'm a good person. I don't feel emotionally isolated, and I can be proud of the person that I am and how I show up for my family. I feel like I'm a respectable person. I've cultivated a good reputation through who I am. And I don't know, no job title, no, you know, I'm doing okay in life in a lot of ways, but like there's nothing that can take that away from me. And so that's what's really important to me. And I think other men will understand that in time.
To kind of jump off of something that John brought up, I think that one of the things that also really, really helps, especially in narcissistic cases with narcissist parents, is that once the child in question has grown up and they are now independent, I think that there's definitely, you know, the frontal lobe finishing development around 25, 26, etc. But I think it's also that level of independence and not being connected or attached to the narcissist parent as much. It helps you experience a much broader worldview. And as that kind of goes through your life and you start to realize a lot more things, it's it's a lot easier to emotionally distance yourself from the narcissist because you're not reliant on them anymore, and you're your own person, and you have your own, you know, ideally your own income and things going on academically or, you know, career wise. And I think having that distance of having your own life that is separate from your family is really, really powerful in being able to recognize those narcissistic tendencies and dynamics in your family.
Very well said. So make friends, date around, find things that make you happy, and find secure attachments, because that will reveal to you how messed up and not serving you any of the narcissistic dynamic was. So all of that though takes time. So the number one advice is there's no magic bullet, there's no quick fix, there's no weekend retreat or overnight event where it's just all going to change for you. It takes deliberate time and effort and progression of life naturally to recover from narcissistic dynamics. And in the grand scheme of our life timeline, like if, let's say, we all went no contact with him, let's just put a date on it and say like 2019 or when I was age 21, then that means that for the first 21 years of my life, I was exposed to this environment, and I'm only 27 now. So I've only had like 6 years, like a child, an infancy kind of time outside of the active stressor being a part of my life. So I just think I'm making great progress. We're making great progress, but it's going to take at least a 10-year-old, to like feel more, and like we're doing great, but like
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, so it's not going to be until I'm well over 30 to have had as much time in my life independent of him and without the active stressor, like, as I had exposed to him with the active stressor. So that's like, be compassionate with yourselves. It'll be a journey. That doesn't mean you're cooked if you only go no contact when you're like 42, that doesn't mean, but like, I'm just saying it takes time, and that's okay.
Oh, you're cooked. Oh my God. How can I support both of you?
I think you've done a wonderful job of mediating this wonderful podcast. I'm very excited.
Just keep being the amazing, resilient person that you are. Keep shining. Put the podcast out, and keep being an amazing friend. Keep clearly stating your needs from us. Keep shining. Keep sending your amazing fiance into my life and into my men's workspace, and and just be understanding that like you're also on this journey, and like there's hope for you too, and all of these things.
The advocacy and the awareness that you're bringing with this podcast and with the community that you've built, I think is really powerful and really important. So I really want to commend you on that. It's really awesome to see that this is now becoming a lot more normalized of, healing and being very active and intentional with it.
Yeah. I feel like just even in the few months that I've known you and since being a guest on your platform, it has created a stronger closeness with my sister and more openness, and because your openness, you're very candid. When I was 24, I was not there yet, right? Like I was not talking about the stories I just told about my dad. I would have kept inside because I was very like scared. So you're, even relative to where I look at my own journey, a lot further along at a younger age, which is amazing to see. So just like, you'll get through it, you'll get through the woods, and you're an amazing and resilient person, and through your openness other people are then able to like progress as well, which is amazing, and I've benefited from that, certainly. So thank you for being who you
Vibes.
are.
I thank you for being who you guys are. I'm so excited. I started this podcast because I wanted to be able to talk about trauma and learn other people's perspectives, mostly just to learn. And then as I started doing more and more episodes, I wanted to build connections with like-minded individuals and real connections that I can, rely on, because trauma is so isolating and we need community. We need people who see what we're going through, can support us, can call us out for when we're being little bitches, which Johnny has done for me.
I
And
don't use that
so
language though, to be clear, everybody.
it's okay. It's okay. So it's all with love. The people that love you the most will see your deficits and not judge you for them, but steer you in a way to which they know you can be better. They know that you have so much more capacity for growth. Life is all about growth. My final thoughts for healing dynamics with your siblings after narcissistic abuse is to listen to them, is to listen to what they have gone through, because you may think you know, but you don't actively know. You don't actively know how all of these experiences that you may have had together, how they have shaped the person that your sibling is. And it's really important to never doubt what they are saying, even if you don't remember it the same way. Don't doubt it. Accept it. I think radical acceptance is what has really helped me change my perspective towards my siblings, especially one in particular who I knew was angry all the time. I now, as an adult, can comprehend why that small child was so angry and would lash out at me. It wasn't because he hated me. It was because of what he was going through. And I love him so much, and I'm never not going to reaffirm to myself, even when he's being a little butthole, that I know that he loves me. I know that I love him. And I know we have so much capacity to grow and understand each other. And yeah, Johnny is right. It just takes time. It takes time, and we have time. I want to strongly advise to those of us that are on our healing journey and our siblings are not, to keep loving them from the sidelines. Don't push your healing journey on another person, because it's your healing journey. They have to go through these things on their own. You can still, talk about your experiences, but unless they're actively asking for help, like I need to help finding a therapist, or I need help with this, that, or the other thing, I would strongly recommend that you don't do too much. And I have to tell that to myself all the time. I can recommend things high and low, but it's not going to change them unless they want to do it. And it's not anything against me. It's not even anything against, you. It's just everybody is on a different path, and we shouldn't compare our journeys to one another. Like, yes, I may be 24, Johnny, but I am a different person than you. And I may be healed in some ways that you are not, and you are definitely healed in some ways that I am not, right? We're all on a different path. We are all figuring this shit out. Life is really hard, but it doesn't have to be forever. And something that has really helped me change my perspectives on life is learning what other people's perspectives are. And I am so grateful that you guys shared your story with me and with the listeners. And I truly appreciate it. You have helped me, at least, and I know you probably are going to help other people once I post it. But I'm very grateful. And love, I would like to be your friend. Johnny recommended it like when he first came on the podcast, and I was like, hold up, let me meet them for myself. Okay, you can't just shove your sister on me. Let me interact first. He freaking tried. Don't even deny it, Johnny. You tried.
I won't. I just think it's the pot calling the kettle black for you to say that, because I think both of us maybe did that a little bit with maybe fiancés and other friends as well. So
Well,
like
you
we're
and
natural. You
Joey
and
are
I
friends as well now.
yeah, we
So
are. It worked, but like that's you're in my vibe is like, oh, I think you'd vibe with this other person that I really know, and we're like, yeah. So
hey, it's all working out.
it's working out.
It's
Well,
all
thank you.
working out.
It was an honor to be on the pod, and I love you, Grace, and I love you, Emily.
I love you too.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're watching us over on YouTube, here are our memes of the week, carefully curated by those amazing people, over on our Discord server. Now let's get into those memes. At the end of every episode, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. Let's spin this wheel, okay? I'm going to spin it again. It landed on disappointment, repugnant, revolted disappointment. We can often feel very disappointed with the way our parents treat us, especially when we're on a healing journey. when we start to recognize their toxicity for what it is, we start to recognize their unhealed wounds for what they are, okay? We can always, go into further depth of why our parents have treated us the way that we were treated and still know that it's not okay and that it's not valid, all right? Yes, they have a reason. That doesn't make it a good reason. I'm very tired of parents constantly saying, well, I did the best I could. Sometimes you didn't. Is the best, I think about that all the time. Especially when I see enabler parents towards, their abusive spouse or the abusive parent, an enabler saying, oh, they did the best they could. Oh, you have to forgive them. First of all, no, I don't. Second of all, I know for damn well that abusive parent did not do the best that they could more than half the time. Okay? I know it for a fact. It's important for us to recognize that feeling disappointed in our parents is honestly a good thing, because it helps you differentiate what you would have done if you were the parent, and maybe if you do become a parent in the future, what you will and what you won't do. It's really important for when we become parents, especially before we become parents, that we're able to recognize our poor decisions, that we're able to correct them, learn from them, and move forward. Recognize other people's poor decisions when we feel disappointed in them, maybe call them out if it's safe, and move away from those things. What do I mean by that? Let's say if your mother is constantly harassing you on your ideologies and you know for a fact that their ideologies are incorrect, right? You can feel very disappointed in them. You can feel repulsed by them. And you don't have to take their words as gospel, and you do not have to give any importance to their words. You don't. It's an amazing part of growing up and being an adult, is being able to say, I'm not going to listen to your advice anymore, and move forward. A lot of times we hold too much credence to the people that raised us and not listen to our inner voice. I want you to listen to your inner voice today, especially when you're starting to feel disappointed with the actions of others. Think about why you wouldn't condone those actions and move forward. Special thanks goes out to all of our Discord listeners. Thank you so much for being here and supporting the podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet. That's a handmade bracelet made by me, Grace, or you can get a sticker like the one on the back of my computer. The links are in the description. Any support helps us out a lot. So if you feel compelled to, like, comment, subscribe, share the show. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. I'll see you guys in the next episode where we do our anonymous confessions with Johnny. So he'll be back for the next episode. All right. Goodbye.